The orcs made a mistake that probably cost them the Battle of Minas Tirith. Had they not made this mistake, they would have won the battle. Probably quite easily. They were, no joke, about a minute away from declaring victory. And it wasn't really a mistake that they made with the Army of the Dead. It wasn't a mistake they made with manning the docks or not. It wasn't a mistake they made by sending thousands of orcs to die with a small little battering ram before they sent in Grond. It's nothing that the movies actually show. It's a book mistake that the orcs made because, let's be honest, in the movies there's not really all that much of tactics going on in this battle. There's a huge army from Minas Morgul, and they march and they just kind of land in Osgiliath. They take the river, and then they march over into the fields of the Pelennor, and they lay siege to the White City. There's not like moves and counter moves. Tolkien, I think, writes in the book as someone understanding battle and positions, and again, counter positions and timing and intimidation. They are some of the best battle scenes that I've ever read in my entire life. And I think a lot of writers at the time of Tolkien were writing, about the great horrors of battle, but they didn't really give you the scale and the complexity of it. And Tolkien does that so well. And in the books, the orcs made just one dumb mistake that legitimately cost them the war. And as I'm reading for the first time, I can't help but think this is some kind of providential act, where the god of Middle-earth is riding the orcs' emotions into just being orcs, because their grave mistake comes in the Ride of the Rohirrim chapter, when Theoden is about a day away from Minas Tirith. But before we get there, we've got to know a few things about book Gondor rather than movie Gondor, because there are a few differences, but there's one major difference in the books versus the movie's portrayal of it. In the book, there is an outer wall, and this is the biggest difference. There's an outer wall named Ramos Echor, and it's about 3 to 4 leagues from Minas Tirith. That's about 10 to 12 miles. This wall skirts the banks of the Anduin. It moves up north and brushes past Osgiliath, and it continues north till it gets to Mindalluin, where Minas Tirith is. Now, the Witch King is a smart battle general. When they took Osgiliath, they began sending parties out into the wall, just to kind of take the wall and to hold it so no one else could come through except for them. They drove back the little fiefs and the little towns. They drove them back to Minas Tirith, so they're all holed up in Minas Tirith, and they're surrounding Minas Tirith inside this walled area. Now, this is important because the army of Minas Morgul takes the wall, and the Witch King sends out units to guard the gates of Ramos Echor. One party he sends up north, not the location at the gate they came in, because they came in from the east gate near Osgiliath, and these forces likely brought Grond with them via the east gate, but in the north they sent up trenches and traps and snares outside the wall, essentially to protect them from any aid that they think would come from Rohan. Now, they don't know Rohan is riding to the aid of Gondor. There's maybe a little bit of debate there with whether they know it or not. They probably can guess that Rohan might come for aid. But on this path up north beyond the wall, Theoden's scouts, they ride ahead and they discover that indeed there are trenches and snares set up for them. Now, this would slow them down immeasurably. It's maybe not that terrible of a thing. They probably could get through it, and this isn't really what stopped them from winning, because this was a good war strategy. Now, in order to avoid this, Theoden meets up with the Woses and their leader, Gon Burigan. This guy, he is a legend, already one of my favorite characters, and he's just so good that I'll probably make a video or two about him later this week. So make sure you subscribe for more content about my first time read through of Lord of the Rings. But he doesn't really like Rohan. But one thing he doesn't like more than Rohan is the orcs. He hates the orcs. The book says, "Alas, he speaks all too shrewdly," said Theoden. "And our scouts say that they have cast trenches and stakes across the road. We cannot sweep them away in sudden onset." "And yet we need great haste," said Eomer. "Moonburg is on fire." "Let Gon Burigan finish," said the wild man. "More than one road he knows. He will lead you by road where no pits are. No Gorgoon walk, only wild men and beasts. Many paths were made when Stonehouse folk were stronger. They carved hills as hunters carve beast flesh. Wild men think they ate stone for food. They went through Druadan. to Rimmon with great wains. They go no longer. Road is forgotten, but not by wild men. Over hill and behind it, it lies still under grass and tree. There behind Rimmon and down to Din, and back at the end to Horsemen's Road. Wild men will show you that road. Then you will kill Gorgun and drive away bad dark with bright iron. And wild men can go back to sleep in the wild woods. Now Gan takes them into the Druadan forest, where the first beacon of Minas Tirith is.
The beacon of Amodine is lit!
And he leads them through the forest where there is a valley called the Stonewain Valley. And wouldn't you know where it leads? Right around the trenches and right to the northern gate of the wall of Ramos Hecor. But they've got a problem when they hit that wall, a big problem, a wall-sized problem. That wall is controlled now by the Orcs, and while Theoden and his men likely outnumber the men who are patrolling the gate, it's still hard and annoying to have to get through that wall, and then win that battle, and then march off into the other battle. It likely would have taken them a few hours to do that. Hours that they did not have if they were to get to Minas Tirith before it stopped burning. But the Orcs were stupid. Very stupid in this moment. The Orcs were doing Orc things, and they decided just to destroy the northern gate when they were there, and the wall surrounding it. They're like bored children. And wouldn't you know it, this gives Rohan the opportunity to overtake them fast and just ride in immediately through the gate, rather than lay siege to it. They learn of this in the book when Gan says, "Presently Gan turned to the king. Wild men say many things, he said. First be wary. Still many men encamp beyond Deen, an hour's walk yonder." He waved his arm west toward the black beacon. "But none to see between here and Stonefolk's new walls. Many busy there. Walls stand up no longer. Gorgun knock them down with earth thunder, and with clubs of black iron. They are unwary and do not look about them. They think their friends watch all roads." At that, old Gon made a curious gurgling noise, and it seemed that he was laughing. "Good tidings," cried Eomer. "Even in this gloom, hope gleams again. Our enemy's devices oft serve us in his spite. The accursed darkness itself has been a cloak to us. And now, lusting to destroy Gondor and throw it down, stone from stone, his Orcs have taken away my greatest fear. The outwall could have been held long against us. Now we can sweep through, if once we win so far." And this was their fatal error, because in the previous chapter, everything meshes together perfectly. Denethor makes mention that the Lord of Mordor, Sauron, drives his soldiers from behind, just like the Witch King does, and just like he is currently doing, Denethor. And he will only arrive at the battle when it's won. Well, in the end of the previous chapter, which is the same timeline as this chapter, the Ride of the Rohirrim, Gron knocks down the wall of Minas Tirith and walks in. There's not trolls that walk in first, like the movies, but the Lord of the Nazgul walks in, proclaiming his victory. And he's stopped in his tracks by Shadowfax, and by Gandalf. But he has the larger army behind him, and he knows that he can take the city with this force. But what does the last paragraph of this section say? "And as if in answer, there came from far away another note. Horns, horns, horns. In dark Mendaluin's sides they dimly echoed, great horns of the north wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last." If Rohan came an hour later because they were stopped at the gate, Gandalf may have been killed, and so would have everyone in Minas Tirith. At the very, very least, they probably would have taken another few levels of the city by now, and you probably have been able to take the riders of Rohan just much more easily from a much more strategic position because they're all in the city at that point. And this just reminds me of the previous line that the chapter said about Gollum, where they say, "Let us remember that a traitor may betray himself and do good that he does not intend." These Orcs were so stupid. But I think they were doing this because this was their nature. And I think that these things ending up working for good of Rohan just seems like it's providentially governed and guided. I mean, if they were a few more minutes late, or if they held the wall for just 10 more minutes, You could probably say that Gandalf would be dead in the streets of Minas Tirith. And it's insane to think that that was all because of the dumb orcs in the north that wanted to destroy the gate, not knowing or really fearing that the riders of Rohan were coming straight for them. And it all just seems like Providence was favoring the riders of Rohan in this one. And it's just such a fun little tidbit of writing. I think the war strategy that J.R.R. Tolkien writes in this book is just second to none. It's incredible that not only is it action-packed, not only is it really creepy, but you can see how all these things are moves and counter moves, and how some of the mistakes of the enemy are really providentially governed, and they actually come off and they really, really help Frodo and Sam and the entire side of good. I'm just continually blown away by the writing of J.R.R. Tolkien, because it goes from really, really interesting action to really, really interesting horror and terror. He writes scenes so well, but this was a really, really well executed battle scene. And it was showing a lot of moves and counter moves that they made. And it was just such fun writing for strategy. I just loved every second of it. So that's all I got for today. Make sure you subscribe if you made it this far. Also like the video. And as always, remember to look toward Numenor that was, and beyond to Elvenhome that is, and to that which is beyond Elvenhome and will ever be. I'll see you in the next one.